everyone, thanks for joining me. In today's video we're going to take a look at a few commands. We're going to look at read host, which will allow us to ask the person running the script for some input that we can store in a variable. We're going to look at the if statement, which will allow us to say if a particular condition is met, then do something. And we'll also look at the else statement, and the else statement will say not only if a condition is met to do something, but explicitly if it isn't met, what to do as well. And we'll also look at a couple of the comparison operators, such as equals, greater than, and less than. So to start with, let's comment out what we don't need, and we'll start looking at the read host command. We'll create three variables, one called number1, one called number2, and one called number function. So we can see we've got three variables, and each one we're assigning to the read host function, and then we're putting in a little bit of text. So if I run that, you'll see what happens. We get asked for number1, so we're going to say 7. We're going to say number 2 is going to be 5, and then add or subtract, we're going to put the letter A for add. Now we haven't done anything yet with those values, so all that's happened is we've stored each of those values in each of the variables. So if I take a look at number 1, it's 7, number 2 is 5, and number function is A. And that's how you use read host. So we're no longer constrained to having to have our variables modified in the script itself. We can actually do so by asking the user for input. And of course I can run that again and use a different set of values. So for number 1, we'll put 9, and I think 2, and we're going to say add. Again, nothing's happening at this point, we're just giving the value A for add. I could equally put S for subtract, or any random letter, G for whatever that might stand for. But after that, number 1 and number 2 will be added together. So what are we expecting? The number 11? No, we get 92. And the reason is because we've read that information in as text. We can specify number 1 and number 2 as being numbers by setting the integer type. So in front of each variable, if I put an open square bracket int, you can see it goes green. And if I run that again, it should add those numbers up. And sure enough, 8 plus 4 is 12. Alternatively, I could specify that the variable is an integer or a number at the point at which I create the variable. Let's run that again. And sure enough, 4 plus 2 is 6. Now let's introduce the if statement. To write an if statement, we need to write the word if, then open a regular bracket, type in the variable we want to compare, then a comparison operator, and then what it is that we're comparing that variable against. So for example, I could say if number function equals A, add. Let's try that. Okay, let's run that again. And if I put in A for add, I get 11. Let's run it again. I'll choose something else. This time I'm going to say S for subtract. But strangely, we still get 8. It still added it together, even though we didn't put in the letter A. So why might that be? It's a common mistake that people make early on when they're learning PowerShell, and that is that the equals operator is different from the equals sign, meaning set the value at. So what we're actually doing, if we look at this number function equals A here, is we're not comparing it, we're actually setting it. So we're saying if, and then we're going to set the number function to A, and then we're going to add number 1 and 2. So whatever we put in, it's always going to be A. What we need to do is change that to the equals operator. And you can see as I put the hyphen and start typing, I get lots of different options. I won't look at all the different options at the moment, but for the moment we'll look at some common ones such as equals. So we've also got not equals as well, so we could say if it doesn't equal a, ne not equals, eq equals. So if number function is a, we'll add them together. Let's see what happens there. So I'm going to put a different value in, I'll put in g, and it doesn't do anything, and that's because it looked to see if the number function was equal to a, and of course it wasn't, it was equal to g, and so therefore it didn't run the number 1 plus number 2. I could say if it isn't equal to a, in which case if I type in a, I get nothing. If I type in anything except a, I should get the addition. And sure enough I do. As I mentioned earlier on, we also have the else statement. The else statement will allow us to say not only if you meet a command to do something, but what to do in the instance that that isn't met. So for example, we'll change that to if the number function is a, we'll add them. If it's s, we're going to subtract. So there's two if statements together with no else statement, and if it equals to a, we're going to add, and if it's s, we're going to subtract. And again, let me run that through again. 6, 7, and if I say s for subtract, I get -1. And if I say a for add, I get 16. And if I put the letter g, which is meaningless, I get nothing. So another way to do this would be to say, instead of if it equals to s, to subtract one number from the other, we can say else. So now we're saying if the number function answer is a, we're going to add the numbers, but if it isn't a, i.e. if it's anything else at all, then we're going to subtract the numbers. Let's see how that works. 5 and 3, do we want to add or subtract? If I put in a for add, I should get 8, and I do. I'll try that again. And this time, instead of subtract, I'll put any value at all. As long as it's not a, I'll put in q, and it subtracts it. So that, very simply, is how the if and else statements work, and you can see it's quite useful to have it in conjunction with the read host command as well. But before we finish off today, we'll do something a little bit more advanced. So we're not going to compare the number function as to whether it's add or subtract. We're going to base it on the number itself. So let's comment out the number function command. And this time, instead of looking at what the number function is, we're going to look at what the numbers themselves are. So we're going to say if number 1 is equal to 7, then we're going to add the numbers together. And if it isn't, we're going to subtract them. So this time I'm going to say it's 7. 7 and 2 is 9. This time I'm going to do it the other way around. I'm going to say that's worth 2 and that's worth 7. And instead of adding them, it subtracts them. And the reason I wanted to show you this is because with numbers, we can also do other operators such as greater than and less than, or less than and equal. So for comparing the value of number 1, I could say if it's less than or equal to 7. So if I put LE, that's less than or equal, and now if I run it, a number that's less than or equal to 7, well, 7 is equal to 7, and 3, and it adds together to 10. Now if I type in something that's less than, such as 3 and 2, it will still add them together, 5. If I go higher than 7, so 8 and 2, and we get 6 because it's subtracted it. And as well as less than and equal, there's also greater than or equal. So larger than 7 and it adds it. If it's 7, it also adds it. But if it's less than 7, it takes it away. And as well as the greater than and equal and less than and equal, we can also just say greater than or less than. So if I were to say greater than 7 and run that again, 7 will no longer trigger the addition. 7 isn't greater than 7, it's equal to 7. And of course we can do that with less than. So I hope you found those examples interesting and useful. And as I say, in a future video we'll expand on that further and we'll take a look at loops. There are several types of loops that we can use in PowerShell to allow us to repeat some or all of our script. So if you've enjoyed this video, please give me a like and a subscribe. I hope to see you again in the next video, and until then, thanks for watching.